Welcome to Seattle Atheist Church. Welcome agnostics, atheists, our friends and allies, whatever you like to call yourself, you are welcome here at Seattle Atheist Church. We call ourselves an atheist church because you will never hear anything supernatural promoted from the podium. We're founded on the principles of scientific naturalism and secular ethics. Truth claims are attempted here, and we stand ready to revise our thinking in light of new information. We attempt to be excellent to all conscious beings, and we believe in good, because good works in non-mysterious ways. Before we get started, we have 3 announcements, so let me see if I can try to remember them all. So, not until November 5th, on November 5th, Ta-Nehisi Coates is coming to talk at Benaroya Hall. And there's a group of us who already have said that we want to go. And we invite you, if you would like to be part of that group. The tickets go on sale July 24th. And so I'm going to try to buy a block of tickets. When we buy them in a block, they're about $30 a piece. So if you want to be part of that, give me your money, or at least strongly commit to giving me your money, and I will get us a block, and then we can go together. The second thing is Michael is going to be moving, and he needs some help moving. So I'm not sure on the details of that, but yeah, let's, come talk to Jack, okay? So that sounds great. And then the third thing is, if you would like to support the church financially, there's a jar in the back where you can drop a donation. And also, I think off of seattleatheist.church, there is a way to do it with a credit card.
We have a credit card.
There's a credit card reader here at church today. We are a 501c3, so it is a tax-deductible donation if you would like it to be. Okay, so the way we do it here is people at church, we ourselves give the talk, and we are really looking forward to this talk by Eva. Come on up.
Good morning. So I read this book. This is a great, big, huge heck of a book. Derek Parfit died at the beginning of this year, which is kind of how he came to my attention, because a good friend of mine was pretty much heartbroken, and I'm like, who is this guy that is some philosopher that means so much to you? So I read his book, and it took me months to get through, not for the usual reason with philosophy texts. Usually philosophers are hard to read because they make up a lot of words, and sometimes they're translated from German. In this case, Parfit wrote incredibly clearly and carefully, so it's not the clarity of his writing that's in question. It's that he is writing about some really tricky stuff. This could easily be 4 books, except that it's kind of one continuous complex argument that threads through a whole bunch of different topics. And I have to warn you, it doesn't really resolve. He doesn't come up with, these are the be-all and end-all of the philosophical answers of identity and ethics. But he does rule out some things and narrow down the possibilities and bring up some distinctions that other philosophers have, I think, completely missed. I can't possibly give you a summary of this book in 20 minutes. I can touch on some things that I thought were really interesting and important, and I hope, kind of whet your appetite for, well, maybe I want to go see more about the details on this. I had to read it slowly because I would read a sentence and then think about it, and then go back and flip to the previous section where he talked about the thing that he was talking about, and then go back and think about it some more, and then read the next sentence. So that's why it took me like 4 months to read it. So it's Reasons and Persons because he's talking about what are good reasons for doing things. We make choices about what actions we're going to take based on some kind of model of either what are rational choices or what is the ethical thing to do. And there are some different basic premises that you can take as your underlying reason for doing things. And how those reasons work ends up linking in also with the question of identity. If we're making choices based on benefiting people, and perhaps benefiting primarily ourselves, or perhaps primarily benefiting people that we have an obligation to or a connection with, the question of identity is also important to these choices. So he ends up talking about what is a person, and is identity actually the thing that we care about? Like, never mind what is identity, but is that the important thing even? So it all connects, and you come out the other end with your mind sort of half blown, going, wait a minute, what about the rest of it? Damn, he died before he could figure it out. Yeah, regrettable. So here are a few of the basic ideas about reasons that you can have for acting. You can have a model that is a theory about rationality, or you can have a theory about ethics, and those are not the same thing. So you can't argue against a theory of rationality by using a theory of ethics. You can't say, well, that's not rational because it's morally wrong. You're talking different languages. So if we start off with the self-interest theory, that is a theory of rationality. That says, here, let me find the exact phrasing here. Well, actually, let me quote this first. We can describe all theories by saying what they tell us to try to achieve. According to all moral theories, we ought to try to act morally. According to all theories about rationality, we ought to try to act rationally. The self-interest theory says, for each person, there is one supremely rational ultimate aim, that their life go for them as well as possible. So this is kind of what you get into with Ayn Rand. I should make my life go well. That is what I should do. That is the rational thing. Rand, I think, went farther and said, and that's also the moral thing. So Parfit doesn't attempt to argue against the self-interest theory on moral grounds, even though one can, but you have to have some moral axioms to start with if you're going to argue on moral grounds. So he starts off arguing the different theories on their own terms. And it turns out the self-interest theory doesn't stand very well on its own terms. Because if you are fully committed to acting only in your own self-interest at all times, you will actually end up undermining yourself a lot of the time. There are a whole lot of real life examples, and he also comes up with some rather outlandish sort of science fictional examples that make it really clear cut. But there are lots of times when selfishly focusing on your own interests will actually get you personally worse results. So that is one way in which the self-interest theory really doesn't hold up as the most rational approach. And he also looks at consequentialism. And there's a lot more to self-interest theory and what's wrong with it and what you can't actually use as an argument against it. I mean, he spends like this much of the book on it. Consequentialism, I think we've talked about it here. I think Jack's talked about it some. Consequentialism is an ethical theory, and it says that we should each do the thing that will lead to the best result. And that is, all of these can be defined in a lot of different ways. Like self-interest can be defined by hedonism, or it can be defined by what would be best for my whole life, or what would fulfill my current goal. So there are a lot of different versions of them you can look at. Consequentialism, similarly, you have to define what the best outcome is. You have to have some values in order to even talk about how do I know that what I'm doing is good. And also, you don't know the outcome, so you can only go with probabilities based on your current knowledge. So it's always going to be imperfect. All of this is going to be imperfect. And there's also morality, common sense morality. These are the rules for good behavior. We want to do these things because they're the right thing to do. And common sense morality rule sets can come from the Bible, they could come from a different religious source, they could come out of philosophical thinkers, or they could come from mainstream cultural standards. So he takes consequentialism and he takes common sense morality and goes, well, there are flaws with both of these. If you use them in their pure form, you don't get good results. You get stupid choices in a lot of cases. And as he modified consequentialism to produce better results, and he modified common sense morality to produce better results, they actually converged a bit. And he came up with a thing called critical present aim theory, which is a kind of a unified, modified version of consequentialism and common sense morality. Basically says you should do the thing that, assuming you had all the information and assuming that you had all your best faculties and resources available to you, you would conclude would likely produce the best result overall over all space, time, and persons. So it's both challenging and freeing. Obviously, we can't have all the information, and we don't always do the thing that's going to be best overall time, place, persons. But it's hard to argue that we shouldn't. He spends a lot of time and space arguing for neutrality over time and space, and then expands that into neutrality over persons, what he calls agent neutrality, which is the opposite of self-interest theory. It's saying I shouldn't prefer good. Well, it's fairly clear we shouldn't prefer a good that is simply physically closer to us. That doesn't make much sense. But we do a lot of irrational thinking where we prefer things that are closer in time to us. Like, should I eat this cupcake now or have 2 cupcakes in 10 minutes? Well, maybe I shouldn't have 2 cupcakes in 10 minutes. Maybe it's not a good example. But there are lots of choices we make where we go for the thing that's now, even though it would be a better deal to, work now or rest now and have the hedonistic reward later when it will be bigger and serve us better. So there are lots of times when the way we're evolved and the way we've been shaped in our childhoods and throughout our lives leads us to irrational choices. But the rational thing to do is to go, well, what is the best good overall, not what's the immediate good. And when we're acting rationally and ethically, we make choices that lead to better outcomes overall, not this second. So that's part of his argument about being time neutral in your choices. He also spends some time talking about if you used to have a desire and you don't now, does it make any sense to say you have any obligation to fulfill it? And what if you will have a desire later that you don't now? Do you need to make allowance for you'll probably have that desire later? Well, yeah, it would probably be prudent to. And also, by the way, it's immoral to be imprudent. He establishes that one pretty well. If you're wasting an opportunity for good, you are being immoral. So some of his stuff is kind of hard to take, but he's also pretty modest in what he expects of people in some ways, in that he's saying, look, throw out these absolutist rules, because first of all, they lead to some stupid results, and second, you're not going to be able to do them. So let's pick something that is doable by humans with the information and the resources we have. But at the same time, just as you shouldn't preference something just because it's sooner, you also shouldn't preference something just because it's you. And that's a lot harder for most people to take. He spends a lot of time talking about what it means to be you, And he ends up aligning pretty well with Buddhism on this. There isn't actually a you. There are continuities of experience and memory that are more familiar and less familiar. If you lose a bunch of your memory due to disease or injury, there's still you. There's still some you. What if part of your brain is saved in one body and part of your brain is saved in another body? He gets a little outlandish with some of his examples, but there are people who've survived with only half their brains and still seem to be the same person. If you could split it, never mind the brainstem, we need that in both. But if you could split it, be two people, does that mean there are now two of you? Or did you die? Or are you half alive twice? It gets a little weird. So he's talking about this and going, okay, so also you can do teleportation. You know, if you're in a Star Trek transporter, you're actually getting broken down completely and transported elsewhere. Well, you haven't actually been transported because they're different atoms, but you've been reproduced. So, sure, you moved. Or you just got killed and then recreated with all your memories. Or what if they make one copy of you that stays here and one copy of you that goes to Mars or wherever? Are there two of you? What if the process kills the first copy 2 weeks later? With 2 weeks of experiences this one didn't have. You could talk to each other in between. Did you die? So all of his examples and arguments basically add up to, we think identity is black and white. It really isn't. It's really shades of gray, and we shouldn't consider ourselves a totally different category than other people. The person you were in your childhood and the person you'll be 20 years from now have very little in common. You still feel like that's you, but they'd your child's self would probably disagree with you a lot on what your goals should be and what the appropriate choices would be to make them happen. And basically, we should expand our idea of what is a good reason to do something to include the good of everybody. Our selfhood isn't that special, and if all of us made choices on that basis, we would all get better results. So it's rational. So it's both moral and rational to not benefit yourself solely. It's a lot more complicated than I can get across, but that's kind of the basics. I also, I've used a lot of time already, but I kind of want to touch on these diagrams back here. These are a bunch of separate possible lives, or separate possible worlds, populations. Are you going to be able to hear me since I moved back here? Is that
I wanted to check, make sure you're still.
Am I still inside?
Yeah, you're
Okay.
You're good.
So the y-axis here, the height of each block, is the quality of life for the population. You can treat it as an average, or we can just assume everyone in the population has the same quality of life, just for simplistic purposes. The width of the block is how many people it is. So here's A. We've got a population that's pretty happy. They've got good lives. There aren't that many of them. This is fine. This is great. Here's population B. There are twice as many of them. They're not quite as happy. They're still all right. Which is better? There's more happiness here, total. More happiness, bigger area. These people are happier, but there aren't as many of them. And looking at this diagram will kind of force you to examine your assumptions about things like, is it a benefit to a person to be born? Is that a good? Is it good if there's another person? Even if having more people means they're not as happy? Which is better out of these two? Complicating this, here's A+. This is the same population as in A, Only there's also this additional population separated from them. They're not in cultural contact, but these two populations both exist. This population is much less happy. They still have lives that are worth living. The value is not zero, but they're not as happy as this population. Now, if they were right next to each other in the same population, we might object to this on egalitarian grounds. We might say, well, this is not good to have one group that's really doing well and one group that's really doing poorly within the same population. We could argue that it would be better to have just one level of good happiness. But these guys aren't even talking to each other. Is it good that these exist? Or would it be better to have a better average happiness? Is it good that these people have their lives? They'd say so. Sure, they're happy to be alive. We're not going to kill them, that would be bad. But is it better that they exist or not? And then another complication, you take the population in B, divided into not in contact with each other. These are the same size as in A, but they're less happy. Now, if you thought that B was better than A, this should cause you to question that. How can this be better than A? This is people who are all less happy. The more I think about these, the more I go, okay, I don't know what I think. But I'm pretty sure that population Z, where everybody has a life that's barely worth living, but there are lots and lots of them, is not better just because there's more happiness in it. And I'm pretty sure that having one guy who's absolutely blissed out is also not better. So there are some variables in here that need to be looked at closely about, is there a set point of happiness where maybe it doesn't matter if you're happier? Is there a set point of really not happy where it doesn't really matter whether your life existed or not? Probably if you don't want to live, probably it would have been better if you didn't. But it's more complicated than people commonly think of it as, and I really appreciate Parfit drawing out some of these distinctions and showing how it's more complex than we usually think of. So I think we'll have lots of stuff to discuss.